A little girl pointed at a grave and whispered, "Your wife is alive." The powerful millionaire standing there didn't breathe, because he had buried her himself. He had mourned her for a year. He had learned to live with the silence she left behind. But what he didn't know was that the woman he loved might be suffering somewhere, calling his name, waiting for him to find her. And the truth behind her disappearance would uncover a nightmare so cruel, it would change his life forever. If you love emotional stories about family, sacrifice, and hope, take a moment to subscribe. Stories like this remind us that even in the darkest moments, love still finds a way. The rain fell softly over Greenwood Cemetery, turning the gravel paths into thin streams of gray water. Carmine Ferraro stood alone in front of the white marble grave. He was a man the world feared. A powerful American businessman, owner of luxury hotels, real estate towers, and companies across 3 states. People called him ruthless, cold, untouchable. But today, he looked like a broken husband. His black suit was soaked. His hands were clasped tightly in front of him, as if holding himself together. The name carved into the stone read, Rosalie Ferraro, beloved wife. Gone too soon. 1 year. 1 year since the boat accident. 1 year since the storm swallowed the woman who had brought warmth into his hard, lonely life. He remembered the way she laughed. The way she touched his face when he worked too late. The way she said, "You're not as tough as you pretend to be, Carmine." He had searched for weeks after the accident. Coast Guard. Private divers. Helicopters. Millions of dollars spent. They never found her body. Eventually, everyone told him the same thing. Move on. But a man doesn't move on from the only person who ever saw his heart. Behind him, a small voice broke through the sound of the rain. "Sir, your wife is still alive." Carmine slowly turned. Standing a few feet away was a little girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old. Her clothes were worn and oversized. Her shoes were mismatched. Rainwater dripped from her tangled hair. She looked poor, hungry, but her eyes were sharp, serious, older than a child's should be. 2 of Carmine's security men immediately stepped forward. "Hey, kid, you can't be here." But Carmine raised his hand. "Let her speak." The girl didn't move closer. She just looked straight at him. "I saw her," she said quietly. "The night of the big storm. They pulled her out of the water. She was alive. She was crying, and she kept saying your name." Carmine's jaw tightened. "Little girl," he said slowly, his voice calm but heavy, "my wife drowned last year. We searched everywhere. There were no survivors." The girl shook her head. "She has short brown hair, and a long scar on her left arm." The world seemed to tilt. That scar wasn't public. Rosalie had hidden it under a tattoo of roses. A painful memory from her childhood in foster care. Only Carmine knew about it. He stared at the girl. "What else?" he asked quietly. "She wore a gold necklace," the girl said. "A heart with 2 letters. C and R." Carmine felt the air leave his lungs. That necklace was his wedding gift. Custom made. She never took it off. The girl reached into her jacket and pulled out a small white handkerchief. The lace edges were torn, stained by time and weather. 1 silver letter was still visible. Carmine's hand trembled as he took it. He remembered giving this to her mother, Teresa, on their wedding day. A family tradition. Something Rosalie carried everywhere because she said it made her feel like she finally belonged somewhere. "Where did you find this?" he asked. "Near the old cannery by Pier 17, the girl replied. "A white truck stopped there that night. 4 men dragged her inside. One of them had a fake arm. He told the others to move her before anyone saw. Carmine studied her face. There was no fear, no hesitation, just truth and a quiet desperation. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ethan." "Why didn't you tell anyone before?" "I did," the child said softly. "I told a police officer." He laughed. Said kids like me make up stories for attention. Kids like me. Carmine looked at her again. Her thin frame. The worn clothes. The way she stood like someone used to being ignored. "Where do you live?" he asked. Ethan shrugged. "Anywhere I can." For a moment, the rain was the only sound between them. Then Carmine turned to his driver. "Bring the car." Ethan's eyes widened. "You believe me?" Carmine opened the back door of the black SUV and looked at him. "I believe you enough to find out the truth." He leaned slightly closer, his voice low and steady. "And if you're right, I'm bringing her home." Ethan climbed into the car without hesitation. As the SUV pulled away from the cemetery, neither of them noticed the man standing behind a marble statue, watching through binoculars. The man spoke quietly into a small device. "They've made contact," he said. "Proceed to Phase 2. Inside the vehicle, Carmine held the handkerchief tightly. For the first time in a year, hope had returned, and nothing terrified him more. As the rain-covered streets of Brooklyn passed outside the window, Carmine looked at the quiet child sitting across from him. He had lost everything once. Now a poor child from the streets might be the only one who could lead him back to his family. But the question was no longer just whether Rosalie was alive. The real question was, if she survived that night, what kind of hell had she been living in all this time? And why had someone been watching him the moment hope returned? The SUV moved through the wet streets in silence. Rain streaked across the dark windows, turning the city lights into long, trembling lines. Inside, the air felt heavy, like something fragile had entered the space and no one wanted to break it. Carmine sat across from Ethan, the handkerchief still in his hand. He kept looking at the small silver letter. Rosalie. For a year, he had forced himself to accept that she was gone. Forced himself to wake up in an empty house. Forced himself to stop turning toward the door every evening, expecting her voice. Now that pain was opening again. And hope was far more dangerous. "Tell me everything," Carmine said quietly. Ethan nodded. "I was sleeping behind the old cannery that night," the child said. "The storm got really bad. I ran there because the roof doesn't leak." He spoke calmly, like someone used to telling hard truths. "I heard a truck. White one. No company name. It stopped near the back fence." Carmine leaned forward slightly. "They opened the back doors," Ethan continued. "Two men jumped out. Then they dragged her out." His voice lowered. "She was fighting, kicking, screaming. She kept yelling your name." Carmine's fingers tightened around the handkerchief. "They carried her inside the building," Ethan said. "One man stayed outside. He had a metal arm, like a machine. He was the one giving orders." The name Ethan had shouted at the grave echoed in Carmine's mind. "Your wife is still alive. Why didn't you run?" Carmine asked. Ethan looked down at his hands. "I wanted to," he said honestly. "But when they pulled her past the fence, she saw me." Carmine's eyes lifted sharply. "She didn't scream," Ethan said. "She didn't point at me. She just looked at me, like she wanted me to remember her face." The SUV grew even quieter. Carmine swallowed slowly. That sounded like Rosalie. Always thinking ahead. Always surviving. "What happened after that?" he asked. "The next morning, I went back," Ethan said. "I thought maybe there would be something. That's when I found the handkerchief. He hesitated. I didn't know it mattered until I saw her picture in the newspaper months later, when they said the rich businessman's wife had died in a boating accident. Carmine looked at him carefully. You kept it for a year? Ethan shrugged. I keep anything important. When you live outside, you don't get second chances. The words hit harder than the rain against the windows. Carmine studied the child again. The oversized jacket, the thin wrists, the quiet way he spoke about sleeping behind buildings as if it were normal. Where do you stay? Carmine asked. Wherever I can, Ethan said. Under bridges. Behind restaurants. Sometimes the docks. Family. My mom died 3 years ago, Ethan replied simply. Drugs. I found her on the kitchen floor. There was no emotion in his voice. That absence said everything. And your father? Don't know him. The car passed over a bridge. City lights reflected in the dark water below. Carmine looked out the window for a moment, then back at the child. How old were you when you started living on your own? 7. The driver glanced briefly in the rearview mirror, surprised. Ethan noticed and added quietly, It's not that hard. If no one sees you, no one bothers you. Carmine felt something twist in his chest. Rosalie had grown up in foster care. Bruises hidden under long sleeves. Hunger she never talked about. That was why she volunteered at shelters. Why she always said the poorest children were the strongest. Because they learned how to survive without being loved. The SUV turned onto a wide road leading toward Long Island. Ethan looked out the window. Where are we going? He asked. My home, Carmine said. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. Just for tonight, Carmine added. You'll eat. You'll sleep somewhere safe. The child nodded, but after a moment he asked softly, And after that? Carmine didn't answer right away. After that depended on one thing. If the story was true. If Rosalie was alive. If someone had taken her. His phone vibrated. He answered immediately. Yeah. A rapid voice came through the speaker. Petro, his tech specialist. Boss, I pulled old incident reports from that storm last year, Petro said. Something's off. Carmine straightened. Talk. The official report says the boat capsized due to severe weather, Petro continued. But there's a second file that was edited later. What kind of edit? There was no storm damage to the hull. The boat had clean puncture holes. Like someone drilled them. Carmine's blood ran cold. You're saying it wasn't an accident. I'm saying the boat was sabotaged. The SUV slowed as the gates of the Ferraro estate came into view ahead. Carmine looked at Ethan. The poor child who had been sleeping behind buildings. The child no one believed. The child who might have just uncovered something far bigger than any of them understood. Petro, Carmine said quietly, his voice turning cold, start pulling every camera within 5 miles of that cannery. I want trucks, faces, license plates. Everything. There was a pause. Boss, Petro said carefully, if this wasn't an accident, then someone planned this. Carmine watched the gates slowly open. I know, he replied. The SUV rolled forward into the long driveway. And if someone took my wife, he said softly, then this wasn't an accident. His eyes darkened. It was war. Inside the mansion, warm lights glowed through tall windows. For the first time in a year, Carmine wasn't coming home to grief. He was coming home to answers. But as the vehicle disappeared behind the iron gates, neither he nor Ethan noticed the dark sedan parked across the road. Inside it, a man lowered his phone after taking a photo. The message he sent contained only 4 words. He's starting the search. The estate doors opened before the SUV even stopped. Warm light spilled out across the marble steps, glowing against the night. For a moment, Ethan didn't move. He just stared. The place looked less like a house and more like something from a movie. Tall windows, stone columns, perfect gardens stretching into the darkness. He glanced down at his shoes, muddy and worn. "You coming?" Carmine asked quietly. Ethan nodded and stepped out. The warmth hit him first when they walked inside. Real warmth. Not the kind you stole from a subway vent or a restaurant doorway. The air smelled clean. Safe. A woman in her 60s approached from the hallway. Her silver hair was pinned neatly back, her posture straight, her eyes sharp but kind. "You're home early," she said to Carmine. Then her gaze moved to Ethan. She didn't ask questions right away. She just looked at the boy for a long moment. "Mom," Carmine said, his voice steady but tired, "this is Ethan. He'll be staying with us for a while." The woman nodded once. "The child is freezing," she said simply. "Maria." A housekeeper appeared almost immediately. "Bath. Warm clothes. Then food," the older woman instructed. Ethan hesitated and looked at Carmine. "It's okay," Carmine told him. "Go." The boy followed the housekeeper, his steps careful, like he was afraid to touch anything. The older woman turned back to Carmine. Her eyes dropped to the handkerchief still in his hand. The color left her face. "Where did you get that?" Carmine handed it to her. She unfolded it slowly, her fingers trembling as they traced the lace and the silver letter. "I gave this to Rosalie on her wedding day," she whispered. "Every bride in this family receives one." Carmine met her eyes. "Mom, I think she's alive." For a moment, the woman didn't speak. Then her shoulders straightened. "If she is," she said quietly, "you bring her home." Her voice hardened. "Whatever it takes." Upstairs, Ethan sat in a bathtub filled with hot water. He didn't move at first. He just stared at the steam rising around him. He couldn't remember the last time he had taken a real bath. Maybe before his mom died. He slowly sank deeper into the water, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in years. Later, he sat at a kitchen table with a bowl of chicken soup, toast, and a glass of milk. He ate slowly, careful, like someone who had learned that food could disappear at any moment. From the doorway, Carmine's mother watched quietly. She saw the way the boy glanced at the plate between bites, the way his hand hovered protectively over the bowl, the way he never wasted a crumb. Her expression softened. Meanwhile, downstairs, Carmine stood in a room hidden behind a steel door. Screens covered one entire wall. Camera feeds. Maps. Data streams. Petro sat in front of them, typing fast. "I pulled traffic cameras from that night," Petro said without turning. "Pier 17 area. 3 blocks radius." Footage appeared. Rain. Empty streets. Then a white truck. Petro froze the frame and zoomed in. No company logo. Plates partially covered. The video played. The truck stopped near the abandoned cannery. 4 figures jumped out. Then another shape. A woman. Even through the grainy footage, Carmine's heart stopped. Short hair. Thin frame. She struggled. One of the men grabbed her arm. Petro enhanced the image. A long mark down the left forearm. Carmine leaned closer. "That's her," he whispered. The footage continued. A man stepped into the frame. Tall. Gray beard. And his left arm. Metal. "He matches the kid's description," Petro said. "Military posture, too." The white truck drove away. Seconds later, a black SUV followed. Then a gray sedan. "All 3 vehicles moved together," Petro said. like a convoy. More footage appeared. The vehicles entered a tunnel toward Manhattan. Then another camera. Another. Then nothing. They went into an underground parking structure, Petro said. No public cameras inside. No record of them leaving. Carmine's voice was low. They switched vehicles. Exactly, Petro replied. This wasn't random. This was planned. Professional. Carmine stared at the screen. Someone had sunk her boat. Someone had waited for the storm. Someone had taken her alive. And kept her hidden for a year. Run facial recognition on the man with the metal arm, Carmine ordered. Already started. Petro hesitated. There's something else. Carmine looked at him. I hacked into the original Coast Guard report, Petro said. The public version was edited. Carmine didn't blink. Edited how? The first report said the boat had multiple drilled holes below the waterline. Silence filled the room. It didn't sink because of the storm, Petro finished. It was sabotaged. Carmine's hands slowly curled into fists. Trace who changed the report. Petro's fingers flew across the keyboard. Working on it. Upstairs, Ethan sat on the edge of a large guest bed, wearing clean pajamas that were too big for him. He ran his fingers over the blanket. Soft. No holes. No stains. A knock came at the door. Carmine's mother stepped inside. She carried a folded sweatshirt. For tomorrow, she said, placing it beside him. Ethan looked up at her. Thank you. She sat down slowly on the chair across from him. You helped my son today, she said. Ethan shrugged. I just told the truth. She studied him carefully. When no one believed you, why didn't you stop? The boy thought for a moment. Then he answered quietly. Because she looked at me like I mattered. The older woman's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. Downstairs, Petro turned toward Carmine. I got a hit. The screen filled with a military file. Name: Frederick Shaw. Former U.S. Army colonel. Lost his arm in combat. Now owner of a private security firm. Petro opened another window. Financial records. Shell companies. Medical facilities. Then another file appeared. Missing persons. Dozens. Mostly women. Mostly people no one would come looking for. Carmine's voice dropped. What kind of business is he running? Petro swallowed. It looks like human trafficking. The room went very still. Then Petro opened one more file. Medical records. Target profiles. Health history. Rare blood types. Cancer survivors. People with unusual recovery rates. Carmine felt something cold spread through his chest. Rosalie had beaten cancer 2 years before she disappeared. Her doctors had called her recovery remarkable. Petro looked back at him. I think they didn't take her by accident. Carmine stared at the screen. They chose her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Carmine leaned forward, his voice quiet and steady. Find where they took her. Petro nodded. It might take time. Carmine didn't move. For a year, he said softly, she's been somewhere waiting. His eyes hardened. Now it's their turn to be afraid. That night, the house did not sleep. Lights stayed on in rooms that were usually dark. Quiet footsteps moved through the halls. Phones rang softly behind closed doors. Somewhere downstairs, Petro's keyboards never stopped clicking. But in one room, for the first time in years, a child slept without fear. Ethan lay curled under a thick blanket, the kind of warmth that sank deep into his bones. He had eaten more than he thought his stomach could hold. He had bathed in hot water. No noise from the streets. No shouting. No sirens. No one stepping over him. Still, his eyes opened once in the middle of the night. He sat up slowly. For a moment, he looked around, confused by the silence. Then he whispered into the darkness, almost like he was testing the words. "I'm inside." And for the first time in 3 years, he fell back asleep without listening for danger. Downstairs, Carmine stood alone in Rosalie's old sitting room. Nothing had been moved. Her books were still stacked on the small table. A scarf still hung over the back of the chair. A framed photo of the two of them rested near the window. He picked it up. It had been taken on a beach vacation. Rosalie was laughing, her hair blown across her face, her hand pulling him into the frame. He remembered that moment clearly. "You always look like you're about to negotiate a contract," she had teased him. "Smile like you actually love your life." He had smiled then, because with her he had. Carmine set the photo back down carefully. For a year, this room had been a memorial. Now it felt like a promise. A knock came at the door. "Boss," Petro's voice called quietly. "I think I found something." Carmine was in the basement seconds later. Petro didn't look up when he entered. His eyes were red, his hair a mess, coffee cups scattered across the desk. But his hands were steady. "I tracked Frederick Shaw's company," Petro said. "Sentinel Security. On paper, it's private protection and corporate risk management." He pulled up another screen. Underneath that, shell companies. Medical supply contracts. Research partnerships. Offshore accounts. Carmine leaned closer. "How big?" "Bigger than we thought," Petro said. "Multiple properties. Some legal. Some hidden." A map appeared. Dots spread across 3 states. Then Petro zoomed in on one location. "Power usage here caught my attention," he said. "Registered as a small biomedical research facility." He pulled up the data. Electricity consumption matched that of a full hospital. "But there are only 2 employees listed," Petro added. Carmine's voice was quiet. "What's the address?" "Upstate. Remote area. Forest land. Hardly any traffic." Petro hesitated before opening the next file. This came from internal Sentinel records. A list appeared. Subjects. Each entry had a name, a medical history, blood type, recovery notes. Carmine's chest tightened. "These aren't employees," he said. "No," Petro replied softly. "They're inventory." Carmine stared at the screen. Then Petro typed something and hit enter. The list scrolled. Then stopped. Subject 127. Rosalie Ferraro. For a moment, the room seemed to lose all sound. Petro swallowed. "She's alive," he said quietly. "Status: active." Carmine didn't move. He just stared at the screen. Alive. Not missing. Not dead. Alive. Petro opened the full file. Medical history. Treatment logs. Procedure schedules. The words were clinical. Cold. Efficient. But one line made Carmine's hand grip the edge of the desk. Condition: significant physical deterioration due to repeated extraction cycles. His voice dropped. "What does that mean?" Petro didn't answer right away. Then he said carefully, "It means they've been using her." The room went very still. For a long time, Carmine didn't speak. Then he asked one question. "Location." Petro brought up another window. "It's encrypted," he said. "Multiple layers. Whoever built this system didn't want anyone finding it." "How long?" "I don't know," Petro admitted. "Hours. Maybe longer." Carmine turned toward the door. "Call the team," he said. Petro looked up. "You want to move now?" I want everyone ready, Carmine replied. The moment you find it, we go. Upstairs, Carmine's mother sat at the kitchen table early the next morning. Ethan stood nearby, unsure what to do with his hands. Sit, she told him. He sat slowly. She placed a plate of pancakes in front of him. He stared at it. You don't have to rush, she said gently. Ethan nodded. But he still ate carefully. Small bites. Slow. After a moment, she asked, Do you go to school? Ethan shook his head. Used to. Do you want to go back? He hesitated. Then he said something very quietly. If I stay here, I'd like that. She reached across the table and poured him more milk. We'll see what happens, she said. But for now you're safe. Ethan looked down at the plate again. Then he whispered, almost to himself, I've never been safe before. Meanwhile, in the basement, hours passed. Petro worked without stopping. Finally, just after noon, he leaned back. I've got it. Carmine stepped forward immediately. The map zoomed in. A remote compound deep in the forest. No nearby towns. Limited road access. Underground structures detected through satellite heat patterns. Petro's voice was steady. This isn't a research center. Carmine nodded. It's a prison. Petro turned toward him. There's one more thing. He opened a live feed. Thermal imaging. Human heat signatures inside multiple underground rooms. Dozens of them. Carmine's jaw tightened. How many? At least 30. Carmine's eyes hardened. Then we bring them all out. Petro nodded. But before he could speak again, one of the security monitors flashed. Front gate camera. A black SUV sat across the road. Engine running. Not moving. Not leaving. Carmine leaned closer. How long has that been there? Petro checked the logs. 42 minutes. Neither of them spoke. The vehicle's tinted window rolled down slightly. Inside, a man lifted a phone and pointed it directly at the estate. The room went silent as the image stayed frozen on the monitor. The man inside the black SUV didn't rush. He didn't hide. He simply held the phone steady, as if he wanted whoever was watching to know exactly what he was doing. Watching them. Carmine didn't blink. They're already here, he said quietly. Petro's fingers moved fast across the keyboard, pulling up traffic cameras from the surrounding roads. The SUV had arrived alone. No visible backup. No movement. Just sitting there. Waiting. Do we take him? Petro asked. Carmine thought for only a second. No. Petro looked up. If he's out there alone, he's not the threat, Carmine said. He's the message. As if on cue, the SUV's engine started. The vehicle rolled its window back up. Then it drove away slowly, disappearing down the road without speeding, without looking back. Petro exhaled. That wasn't subtle. Carmine's eyes stayed on the screen. No, he said. It wasn't. Upstairs, the house still carried the quiet rhythm of a normal morning. Ethan sat at the large dining table, carefully finishing his second plate. He paused between bites, glancing toward the windows like he still didn't fully trust the calm. Carmine's mother sat across from him, pretending to read a magazine, but watching him without making it obvious. After a moment, Ethan asked, Is this your house forever? Yes, she answered. He nodded slowly. It's really big. She smiled faintly. It wasn't always this big. Things grow over time. Ethan thought about that. Then he asked something more quietly. Do people ever lose big things? The question hung in the air. She closed the magazine. Yes, she said gently. Sometimes they do. Ethan looked down at his hands. My mom said big things are harder to keep, because everyone wants them. She reached across the table and rested her hand lightly over his. Sometimes, she said, the most important things aren't the big ones. Downstairs, Carmine stood with Petro in front of the map again. The forest compound glowed on the screen. Distance, access routes, entry points. All of it studied. All of it memorized. We move tonight, Carmine said. Petro nodded. I'll stay online during the operation. Cameras, power grids, anything I can shut down remotely. Carmine turned to leave. Then Petro spoke again. Boss, there's something else you should see. Another file opened. Rosalie's medical records. Procedure dates. Extraction schedules. Notes from staff. Carmine didn't want to look, but he did. The last entry was only 3 days old. Condition: severe weakness. Continue harvesting at reduced frequency. For a long moment, Carmine didn't move. Then he closed the file. She's still holding on, he said. Petro nodded. Yeah, he said quietly. She is. That afternoon, Carmine walked through the house slowly. He stopped when he reached the guest room. The door was half open. Inside, Ethan sat on the floor, building something out of folded paper. Small airplanes. Dozens of them. They were lined up carefully on the carpet. Carmine knocked lightly on the doorframe. Ethan looked up quickly, almost like he expected trouble. You make those? Carmine asked. Ethan nodded. My mom showed me, he said. When she was clean, she used to make them for me. He picked one up and held it out. It flies straight if you fold it right. Carmine took it carefully. For a moment, he just held it. Then he asked, You want to see something later? Ethan hesitated. What? The ocean, Carmine said. Rosalie loved the ocean. Ethan nodded slowly. Okay. There was a quiet understanding in that small moment. Two people connected by the same person. Two lives that had both been changed by her. As evening approached, the estate began to move with purpose. Vehicles arrived quietly. Men checked equipment. Weapons were prepared, but no one spoke loudly. No one joked. The mood was heavy, focused. This wasn't business. This was personal. In the kitchen, Carmine's mother stood with Ethan near the window. He watched the black vehicles pulling into the driveway. Are they leaving? He asked. Yes, she said. Where? To bring someone home. Ethan didn't ask more. He just whispered, She's really alive, right? She placed a hand on his shoulder. We believe she is. The sun had already gone down when Carmine stepped outside. The air was cold. The convoy engines idled quietly. Before getting into the lead SUV, he paused. For just a moment, he looked back at the house. At the lights glowing in the windows. At the life still waiting inside. Then he got in. The convoy moved out slowly, disappearing into the dark road leading toward the highway. Inside the house, Ethan stood at the window long after the headlights were gone. Do you think he'll find her? He asked. Carmine's mother didn't answer right away. She looked out into the darkness too. Then she said softly, When a man loves someone the way my son loves her, he doesn't stop. Hours later, deep in the forest, the convoy engines shut down one by one. No headlights. No voices. Only the sound of wind moving through the trees. The compound sat ahead in the distance, quiet and isolated. Lights glowed faintly through a few upper windows. But most of it was underground. Hidden. Protected. Carmine stepped out of the vehicle. Night vision equipment was passed around. Weapons checked. Positions assigned. Petro's voice came through the earpiece. Thermal confirms multiple targets inside. Security rotation every 8 minutes. Carmine looked toward the building. Somewhere beneath it, Rosalie was waiting. He took a slow breath, then gave a single quiet order. Move. The team began advancing through the trees. Slow. Silent. Careful. They were halfway across the clearing when Petro's voice suddenly changed. Boss, hold. Carmine froze. What is it? There was a pause. Then Petro said, very quietly, someone just activated the interior lockdown. A second later, every light inside the compound shut off at once. And deep underground, something began to move. The forest fell into a deeper darkness as the compound lights vanished. For a moment, the world felt hollow. No glow from the buildings. No movement from the windows. Just a silent black structure sitting in the middle of the trees, like it had been waiting for them. Carmine didn't move. Petro, he said quietly, did you trigger anything? No, Petro answered immediately through the earpiece. His voice was tight now. That wasn't me. Someone inside shut the power manually. Carmine's eyes narrowed. They know we're here. There was no panic in his voice. Only certainty. The men around him tightened their grip on their equipment. Thermal still active? Carmine asked. Yes, Petro replied. And boss, movement just increased. Multiple heat signatures heading toward the lower levels. A cold feeling moved through Carmine's chest. They're moving the subjects, he said. Or worse. He gave a quiet signal with his hand. Faster. No noise. The team advanced again, crossing the remaining distance through the clearing, staying low, using the shadows of the trees. The air smelled like wet earth and metal. When they reached the side entrance, one of the men checked the lock. Electronic. Dead. Petro spoke immediately. Backup generator is active underground. I can't unlock it remotely. You'll need manual entry. A small cutting tool came out. The metal lock began to glow orange under the blade. No one spoke. Every second mattered now. Inside the building, deep below ground, a long corridor flickered under emergency lights. Red, dim, cold. Behind thick glass walls, figures lay motionless on hospital beds. Thin bodies. Tubes. Machines humming quietly. And in one of the rooms, Rosalie Ferraro slowly opened her eyes. The lights had changed. The steady hum she had learned to ignore for months was different. Faster. Urgent. Her body felt heavy. Weak. Every movement took effort, like her bones were made of sand. Footsteps passed outside the glass. Running. Voices she couldn't fully hear. She turned her head slowly. Something was happening. For the first time in months, something had changed. Above ground, the lock finally snapped. The door opened. Cold air rushed out from inside the building. Carmine was the first to step through. Night vision lit the dark hallway in green shadows. 2 guards, left corridor, Petro whispered. 30 feet. The team moved quickly. Silent. Precise. 2 soft impacts. No alarms. They kept moving. The kitchen area was empty. Metal counters. Industrial equipment. No signs of normal activity. Stairwell behind the refrigeration unit, Petro guided. The large metal door was pulled open. A concrete staircase disappeared into darkness. The air coming up from below smelled sharp. Chemicals. Disinfectant. And something else. Fear. Carmine descended first. Each step down felt heavier than the last. Petro's voice came again. Boss, thermal shows multiple personnel converging on one sector. Which sector? A short pause. The same one where Subject 127 is registered. Rosalie. Carmine didn't wait. He moved faster. The team followed. At the bottom of the stairs, the steel security door stood open. Inside, the corridor stretched long and quiet. Glass rooms on both sides. Machines. Beds. People. Carmine slowed. Even through night vision, the sight hit hard. Men. Women. Some barely more than skin and bone. Some connected to machines that quietly drew from their bodies. One small figure lay curled on a bed no bigger than a child's. One of the men behind him whispered under his breath, "My God!" But Carmine didn't stop. "Sector D," he said. "Now." They moved quickly through the corridor. The deeper they went, the more urgent the sounds became. Voices ahead. Metal doors opening. Equipment being moved. Then Petro's voice cut in sharply. "Boss, you have 3 armed personnel ahead. They're preparing transport equipment." Carmine raised his hand. The team spread out. The corner came into view. 3 men stood beside a wheeled medical stretcher. They were arguing. "She's not stable yet. We don't have time." Orders came through. From who? "You think they tell us everything?" The conversation ended before the last word. The hallway went quiet again. Carmine stepped forward. The stretcher was empty, but the door behind it was open. Sector D. Room 12. His heart pounded once. Hard. Then he walked inside. The room was dim. Machines hummed softly. And on the bed, barely visible under thin blankets, lay a woman. For a moment, Carmine couldn't breathe. Her hair was gone. Her face was thinner than he remembered. Her skin pale. Fragile. But even like this, he knew her. "Rosalie," he whispered. She didn't move. He stepped closer. Her arm lay outside the blanket. The long scar was still there. The faded rose tattoo. His hand trembled as he reached down and touched her fingers. Cold, but warm enough to be alive. "Rosalie," he said again, his voice breaking now. "It's me. I'm here." Her eyelids moved. Slow. Heavy. Then her eyes opened. At first, they didn't focus. But after a long second, they found his face. And in that moment, recognition came back. Her lips parted. The sound barely came out. "Carmine?" He dropped to his knees beside the bed. "I've got you," he said, his voice shaking. "I'm taking you home." Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes. For 12 months she had held on to one belief, that he would come. And now he was there. But before he could say another word, Petro's voice exploded in his ear. "Boss, you need to move now." Carmine looked up. "What happened?" "There's a convoy approaching the compound," Petro said. "Multiple vehicles. Fast." A cold silence filled the room. Then Petro finished quietly. "And boss, the lead vehicle just stopped outside." "They're not running," he said. "They're coming in." Carmine didn't hesitate. "Get her ready," he said, his voice steady again, the steel returning to it. "We're moving now." One of the men began disconnecting the machines with careful hands. Another wrapped Rosalie in a thermal blanket. She tried to speak, but the effort drained her. "It's okay," Carmine whispered, brushing a strand of short hair from her forehead. "Don't fight it. I'm here." Her fingers tightened weakly around his sleeve. That small movement was enough. Outside the room, boots were already pounding down the corridors. Petro's voice came fast through the earpiece. Security team entering the lower level. 14 armed. Carmine lifted Rosalie carefully into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. For a moment, that hurt more than anything he had seen in this place. The team formed around him as they moved back into the hallway. Gunfire echoed from the far end of the corridor. Short bursts. Controlled. "They're cutting us off from the main exit," one of the men said. "Alternate route?" Carmine asked. Petro answered immediately. "Maintenance tunnel. End of corridor C. It connects to a drainage channel about half a mile east." "Move." They ran. Behind them, the red emergency lights flashed through the glass rooms, illuminating the faces of the people still trapped inside. Weak eyes followed them, some too tired even to hope. Carmine slowed for a fraction of a second. "Petro," he said, breathing hard, "send the coordinates to emergency services. Every agency. Every reporter you know." Petro understood. This place is going public. Because this wasn't just about Rosalie anymore. No one should ever disappear into a place like this again. They reached the steel door marked maintenance just as footsteps closed in behind them. The door burst open. Cold air rushed through the narrow concrete tunnel. "Go," Carmine ordered. Water splashed around their boots as they moved through the shallow channel. The tunnel stretched long and dark, lit only by flashlights and the sound of rushing breath. Rosalie's head rested against his chest. Her voice came faintly. "I knew you would come." Carmine swallowed. "I was late," he said quietly. "No," she whispered. "You never stopped. That was the truth. Faith wasn't about time. It was about never giving up." They reached the end of the tunnel just as the first faint light of dawn touched the sky. Vehicles waited beyond the tree line. The team moved quickly, loading everyone inside. Only when the doors shut and the engine started did Carmine finally sit down, still holding Rosalie. She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were tired, but they were clear. "I thought I was forgotten," she said softly. His voice broke for the first time. "You were the only thing I remembered." The convoy drove for nearly an hour before stopping at a private medical facility. Doctors were already waiting. As they took Rosalie inside, she held onto his hand until the last possible second. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. And he didn't. Hours passed. Then more. The sun had climbed high by the time the doctor finally came out. "She's stable," he said. "Severely weakened, but she'll recover. It'll take time. But she's strong." Carmine closed his eyes. For the first time in a year, he allowed himself to breathe. When Rosalie woke again later that evening, the room was quiet. Carmine sat beside her. And on the chair near the bed sat a small boy, holding a folded paper airplane in both hands. Ethan stood slowly when her eyes opened. "I'm the one who saw you," he said nervously. Rosalie looked at him for a long moment. Then she held out her hand. "Come here." He stepped closer. She touched his cheek gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't let them erase me." Ethan swallowed hard. "I just told the truth." Rosalie looked at Carmine, then back at the boy. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the people with the least power are the ones who save everything." Weeks later, the estate felt different. Not quieter. Warmer. Rosalie moved slowly but steadily through her recovery. Strength returning day by day. Color coming back to her face. Ethan no longer hovered near doorways or windows. He laughed now. He ran across the back lawn, launching paper airplanes into the wind. One afternoon, Carmine sat on the porch beside Rosalie as they watched him. "He doesn't know how much he changed our lives," Carmine said. Rosalie smiled. "He knows," she replied. "He just doesn't know he deserves it too." On the table beside them lay a folder. Inside were adoption papers. Ethan Ferraro. When Carmine handed them to the boy later that day, Ethan stared at the documents like he didn't understand what they meant. "Does this mean," his voice shook, I stay? Carmine knelt in front of him. It means you're home. Ethan didn't cry right away. He just stepped forward and wrapped his arms around him. Rosalie joined them. And in that moment, something bigger than wealth, bigger than power, bigger than loss, came back into that house. Family. Months later, the investigation into the facility made national news. The people responsible were arrested. The hidden network exposed. Justice didn't erase the pain, but it gave the suffering a voice. One evening, as autumn leaves covered the long driveway, Carmine stood at the window of his study. Behind him, Rosalie laughed softly in the living room. Ethan's voice followed. 4 years, Carmine had believed power meant control, money, influence, strength. But now he understood something else. Real power wasn't what you owned. It was who you refused to give up on. And the emotional truth of his life became simple. Love doesn't measure wealth. It measures who you keep fighting for when the world tells you to let go. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And tell us in the comments, which region are you watching from?